What's the value of data analytics? How can brands best use it as a tool to respond to consumers? JP Kloppers is Chief Executive of Brands Eye. You did a survey of consumer-facing industries, JP Kloppers. Tell us about it.
That's right. For the past month, we've just done an overview of which are the brands which are most loved by consumers in different industries, and which are the brands which are creating a lot of frustration for their consumer base.
So maybe let's give us some of those insights, because there must be some interesting things that you've been able to extrapolate.
Well, if we look at the overview slide of the whole industry, you'll see...
And then we'll come up in a second. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you'll see this is looking at the size and the sentiment of each of these industries. You see all the way on the right, we've got the banking industry, banking and telco, very big industries in South Africa from a consumer perspective, and generate quite a lot of negative conversation, which is why they kind of weighted at the bottom.
Interesting.
Automotive and fast food and coffee are kind of lighter
How much
brands.
of that coffee is Starbucks?
Well, we're gonna look at that in a bit.
Coffee, it's all positive.
It's mostly positive, and what's interesting here is when you look at what's the differential between the different brands.
Yeah.
Because generally with coffee, people talk about, Instagram of the cup of coffee that they just had, the great experiences that they're having, and sometimes some consumer complaints. But if we actually delve into each of these industries, as we'll do in a sec, we'll start seeing which brands do people love and why.
So that's really interesting. So let's get into the mood index, which I understand, JP, really gives us a sense of the nuances behind the sentiment. So firstly, just explain to me what the mood index measures. I haven't been around for, I haven't been here, but JP will educate me, it's fine.
So the mood index is looking at aggregate of sentiments across an industry. So we look at all consumers in South Africa talking about brands in SA, and then we use our technology to categorize that into what's positive and what's negative, and then look at the reasons why. And the mood index is really just giving a summary of that per industry.
So let's go through the different industries, because I think you said you touch on at least 6 of those industries to give us a sense. Yep. And I think we're starting off with the automobile industry. What are the key findings? And I think the data is up on screen.
Great. In the automotive industry, this is an industry people love talking about positively. And Mercedes-Benz is the most loved brand in the past month. They launched their new E-Class.
People are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about.
But we can actually see it's fairly close. In some of those spikes we see in Volkswagen, they've had a tough last month. And if we look into why, they've had a lot of servicing issues, which customers have complained about.
Coffee, I'm putting my money on Starbucks.
Well, we saw that coffee was all positive, so now let's see what...
So coffee here, interestingly, Starbucks is the lowest rated brand in South Africa.
But it's very new.
It's new. So this is what we're going to need to watch quite closely over the next couple of months. I think people get frustrated by the length of the queues and the slow service times, but that's something which could change very much over the next couple of months.
David's favorite.
I refuse to queue for coffee.
Fast food in general, let's talk about that index.
In the fast food side, this was also a surprise. The most loved brand was Hungry Lion. And
most known.
Most loved.
Oh, most loved, wow.
And the brand with the most negative sentiment was Nando's, which we totally didn't see coming. And what was interesting, and we see it in coffee and in food and in the retail, which we won't look at today, is just this increasing consumer pressure on their finances. And so most of the negative conversation around Nando's is really consumers saying your prices are high, and the biggest word which came through was, we want you to cut your prices.
But you'd think that all of them would battle in the same way. Let's go on to insurance, because that's an area which is a grudge purchase. I mean, fast food isn't a grudge purchase. No. Insurance, you don't want it.
Yeah.
So
insurance was a similar story, actually. We saw the most loved brand being Hollard, and they were most loved for 2 reasons. The one is that they resolve customer queries quickly, and the second really was around them interacting with the communities around them. So they had 2 big kind of sports events over the past month in Joburg.
Retail, my favorite. There must be some interesting stuff coming out of the retail space.
We're not going to look at retail this week. We'll save them for one of the next few weeks.
So we'll move on to telecoms.
Yep, telecoms is also a good one. I think what we saw in telco is just this is a story of brands doing the basics well. Vodacom has the highest response rate to their customers and the shortest response time to their customers.
But very few to choose from here.
Yeah, and Telkom, they have a bad rap because they're competing against MTN, Cell C, and Vodacom, but they actually have a far more complex business dealing with fixed line business And so we've seen telecom actually do fairly well over the past couple of years, just in moving the needle month by month, getting
And
better.
they had fantastic results. I think it was the week before. So that's really interesting how that's
But
converging.
consumers wouldn't respond to results, though. It's a consumer
No, it's a
experience.
convergence. It's just
Convergence,
convergence. Banking.
Yeah, well, I think in banking and as well as in telco, what we see is just the sense that the sentiment leads their decision. So how someone feels today often influences what they decide tomorrow. What was interesting in banking is the most loved brand was Capitec. And what we see here, you can see the difference between the red spike downwards and the blue spike upwards, is as a bank had a problem, in this case Standard Bank with their, the big scam in Japan that happened, is the Capitec customers jump onto those conversations and say, hey, you guys should switch to Capitec because their fees are low and
Awesome.
they can save you a lot of money. And
Well,
that's interesting. That's kind of the holy grail for brands to reach.
The other thing JP does is tells us about the trend tracker of the week.
So here on very much a lighter note, the big sort of topic on social media this week was the Oscar Pistorius sentencing. And what we found interesting in comparing it to the trial 2 years ago was just the marked difference in almost consumer fatigue about the topic. There was almost a 600% decrease in the numbers of consumers talking about Oscar
And this is
Pistorius.
despite the fact that both sides really trying to appeal to emotion in terms of their arguments that they're putting forward. As you're saying, people are just fatigued with this.
On the press side, it was more or less a similar amount of press mentions from the trial to now. But on the consumer side, you'll see in many of the tweets that'll come up on the screen, just people are tired of it, and I think they're wanting to see progress in this area, particularly violence against women.
And as the tweet was saying, it's beyond annoying, which I guess it's sad when issues get annoying, but persist and continue.
Yeah, and I suppose also there's nothing new now. It's a question of how many years. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, and that is it for business this week.
Thanks, JP, for educating me about this new addition to the show. I think I'm really going to enjoy it. Of course, JP Kloppers is the Chief Executive of Brands. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the brands that I'm consuming and seeing how they tally up with JP's segment at the end of the week. And for the rest of you guys, have a safe weekend. And Dave and I will see you on Monday on Business Tonight at 7 p.m.
And let's win the rugby tomorrow.
Rugby?
Rugby?